Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. In this video, we're going to continue our little mini series about multiple authentication for Laravel 5.4. The previous video, we really set up all the multi-authentication. We got our new guard set up, so we can now reference our new admin's authentication by just using the admin guard. All right, so that was kind of the bulk of what's super important about this series. But of course, like all my videos, I want to walk you guys through the rest of the steps, just in case you don't know how to do those other parts. Some of you guys might be familiar with how to kind of finish this off and just kind of clean it up once you understood the guard section. So that's why I broke it up into multiple videos. But today's video, we're going to kind of take one more step into what you need to really complete the whole process, and that's to make a working login form. So by default, if you come over here and take a look at the login form that we created, this login form actually will only log you in for users. It will not log you in for admins. Remember, we have two different types of users. We have admins and customer/users, right? So our customers, this is only going to log us in for our users model, but not our admins model. Okay, so the question now is what do we do from here? How do we log in as a admin? Because I can currently log in as a user, and we know this. We know we're at the user dashboard now, and if I try to go to the admin section, I can't, right? It puts me back over here. So we know the authentication's working. We just need to find a way that we can log in as an admin, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video today. Now, you might wonder why you can't just use the existing contact form. Why can't you just use the same contact form? Well, the reason is because these login forms are tied to a specific model. It's trying to log you in as a user, and it has to kind of have a good idea for which model to do. Of course, there are ways you could get creative if you really wanted to use the same contact form. You could have some sort of select box or something, but I would really question why you would want that. Really think about that, because truthfully, if you have two uniquely different types of users, you don't want to confuse them with having to choose what kind of user they are. Most of the time, like in this example here, that's why we put the users, the generic users at the /login, is because most of these customers aren't even concerned about the fact that you also have admin users. Okay, so they just want the ability to log in. Your admin users or your employees then have another login they go to log into the back end, and that's pretty normal. No one really thinks much of that. So I would recommend following that same paradigm. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's get up our login form set up. In order to get the login form working, we're going to actually be creating another controller for managing all of the logins. We need to display a login, and we need to we actually need to perform the login function. So I'm going to go through both those steps. Obviously, showing the form is pretty easy. Actually registering or logging someone in is going to be relatively simple as well. We're going to be using the auth facade. So this is stuff that's already built into Laravel, and because we're using native authentication, this is going to be something that is pretty easy out of the box. Laravel handles most of it, but I'm just going to show you how to connect the pieces. So let's go ahead and let's start by creating that login controller that we can use to manage everything. Actually, before that, I just want to show you guys as a demonstration, I want to run a PHP artisan route list. And this is obviously listing all of our routes. And I just want to show you guys what is here. So we've got we've got two different login URLs. We've got one at the get HTTP type, and then one is a post. And obviously this one here shows the login form. As you can see, it uses login controller, show login form. And then the other one is actually performing the login. Now we also have a log out function, and I'm actually just going to use the same log out function for both of these. The log out actually works universally, so it logs you out of both guards. So you can just use the one log out. You don't need to create a second one. So we're just going to maintain this same log out, this /logout, posting to /logout. It's got a name logout, and it goes to this logout function. If you go look at the controller code that actually comes with Laravel, you'll see that it just logs you out of all the guards, resets it clears out the session, and then sets up a brand new clean session, and then redirects you home. So it's those 4 lines, and that's all the logout does. Of course, you want to duplicate it for your admins. You could do that and set it specific to the guard. But for this purpose, I'm just gonna let it. When you use logout, it just logs you out of everything, and just resets the entire session. Okay, so we just need to be making these 2 login forms. The rest of this you can see is managed pretty well. We're going to talk about password resets in not the next video, but the one after that. And then registration forms, I'm not going to worry about. Generally with your admins, if you're doing something like user and admins, we already can allow users to register. That comes out of the box. For registering admins, that's a little weird. Usually you're not going to want to have admins, the ability to register themselves. So you'll generally set up a super admin, and then from the backend interface, the super admin can create new admins and invite them to your app. But you're generally not going to have like a forward-facing registration form. And if you did want a forward-facing registration form, all you're doing is you're just creating a form, and when they submit it, you're going to do a normal like CRUD resource create function. It's nothing new. You don't really need to worry about the guards. You don't need to worry about anything. It's no different than creating a blog post or creating a wish list item or whatever else you're creating. It's no different than that. You're just going to do a normal create and fill in the items in the database, and you're good to go. So that's all it takes to do register. So it's not really worth showing because it's just a basic CRUD create function. Okay, so we're going to focus today on these 2. You can see that in our controller, in the auth login controller, we have 2 functions: show login form and login. So let's just take a look at those real quick, and then we're going to create our own. So HTTP controllers, auth, and then we have our login controller. Now you'll notice you don't really see anything here, and the reason is because everything's getting inherited from Authenticate's users. So we can find that by following this up here. If we go to vendor, Laravel, framework, source, and then you can follow Illuminate Foundation. So Illuminate, Foundation, and then Auth and Authenticate's users. Oops, I'm trying to clean up this. Okay, Auth, Authenticate's users. So this here is, let's open both of these. So Authenticate's users, and then let's come back up here and do login controller. Okay, so as you can see over here on the side, Authenticate's users is what is actually basically most of the logic for this login controller. You can see here we got our show login form. It just returns a view, pretty basic. And then here's the actual login function. So the one thing in here that we're not going to be implementing is the timeout events or the lockout events for throttling logins. Of course, you could create that pretty easily, and you can see how it's done here. It's pretty basic, but I'm not going to focus on that today. I'm just going to show you guys how to log in, and if you want to add that functionality, I'm sure that you guys can figure that out. All right, so first of all, we need to do is we need to validate the information that's coming in, make sure that the information is valid from the form. And then here we actually check to see if they currently have too many login attempts. So we don't need that part in our function. If they do, then obviously it fires a lockout event and sends them the lockout response that they were locked out. But we don't need to worry about that. That's only if you're counting your throttling logins. Then you can see here it attempts to actually log them in. This is where the actual login function occurs. If it's successful, then it's going to send the login response, and that would then eventually redirect them back. And then if they're not successful, then this happens down here, which basically means it increments your login attempts and then says, fires an event that a failed login attempt occurred. Okay, so that's basically it. We're basically validating the request. We're going to see if the information matches up. If it does, we redirect them to the right place. If it's not, we redirect them to some other page, either back to the login form or something like that. Just real quick, we're going to take a look at this attempt login, which is located down here. And of course, you guys can follow this code however you want. This is in your vendor folder. So we're going to look at this attempt login. Down here, you can see what's happening is it's using this attempt function, right? So inside this attempt function, it is basically passing in the credentials and then also passing in the remember. So we're going to look at this, but it's just using the authentication facade attempt function or method. That's it. So that's what we're going to be using, and that's really all that it is. That's where all the logic is. If you don't think about this right here, we're just validating, we're running an attempt, and then we're going to redirect them back if needed. So let's go ahead, we can create this. It's actually not that difficult. So first things first, before we actually write the code, let's create some views and some routes to make all this work. So let's head back over. Let's see. Let's actually duplicate. Let's make a new controller for our login. Let's do that first. So, I don't know what I'm doing there. Let's go to PHP artisan make controller. and we're gonna make a login controller. We already have an admin controller, but I want to make one specific for the admins. Or I want to make we already have a login controller. I want to make one specific for the admins. And then also let's go ahead and just let's put it inside the auth folder so that it goes with all these other auth functions. I think that our controllers, that'll be handy. So that's all we need. Let's go ahead and click enter. It created it successfully. Let's head back over here. You can see now inside of our auth, we have admin login controller. Extending controller, it brings in controller. We've got the access to the request, and it's namespaced in the auth folder. Perfect. So now we can make our functions. So we can do public function. We need to do a show login form, and this is just going to return a view. And let's go ahead and just set it up. We're going to put this in the auth folder in the views. So we'll go to resources, views. We're going to put it in this folder right here, and then we'll just create one. We're going to create one in a second, and we'll call it, instead of login, we'll just call it admin-login. Perfect. And that's all we need to do for that. So that function's done. Now we can go through and make another one. This is actually our login function. Login. Perfect. And then just for now, just so we don't return any errors, I'm going to return true. And then that's it. We're going to come back and fill in the login function in just one moment. But let's just go through and get our routes and our views set up, and then we'll come back and finish the login. So we need to create this view first of all. So let's just come down to our login. You can see that here. And I'm just going to duplicate this file. And we're going to name it admin-login. And otherwise, we can just leave it basically the same. Let's make a few changes here. We need to, instead of just saying login, I'm going to say admin login, just so that we know that we're in the admin. And then we need to change our route as well. So it's normally posting to the login route. What we're going to do is we're going to do admin.login.submit. Okay, so we're going to submit the login for the admin. And then that's going to be a post request, so we'll remember that here in a second. Otherwise, this is pretty basic. Just want to note here, you've got your CSRF field. Obviously, you're still using the web middleware, so make sure you have CSRF field because that's going to be required. And then you can see that we have a input for our email. It's called email, so that's going to be important here in just a second when we set up our login. So we have a field that's coming in as email. Of course, if you want to change this to username or something, you could always do that. Just don't forget. But it's coming in as email. And then let's see, we've got our password here. So we've got name equals password. That's the second field that holds our password. And then finally, we have a checkbox here called remember. This is going to be either true or false depending on whether or not we have it checked, okay? And then we're going to pass this function in so we can tell Laravel whether to keep the user logged in or to just log them in for this session. And that's it. So then we submit the form, and that is it, all right? So that's good. Make sure we make this route now, this admin.login.submit, and that's what we're going to do now. We've got the view that we need. Let's see, we already have a view, I think, for our admin. We do, and it says admin dashboard, so we're good there. Let's close this up, and now let's take a look at our routes. So we're going to go to our routes web, and inside of here, we're going to go through and make a route for two different routes. We're going to do one to show the login form and then one to post the login form. So we're going to do admin/login, and then we're going to attach it to auth admin login controller, and then we're going to do show login form like that. And we're going to go ahead and name this. Let's get all these named. We're going to do admin.login to present the login form. Now let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to do that again down here, but this time we're going to change it to a post. We're going to go to the same URL, and then obviously the same controller. We're just going to change the method to login, and then we're going to do admin.login.submit as the name. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a name while we're at it. Our admin dashboard, let's name it admin.dashboard. I love using named routes. It makes it so much easier. If you end up changing these URLs in the future, you don't have to go back through and change all your authentication stuff because you've been using named routes, okay? So I loved using named routes. And another thing I want to, okay, one thing real quick before we're gonna have a bug here. Make sure, because this is /admin, and then these are /admin/login, make sure this /admin actually occurs after your other ones. Otherwise, all of these methods are going to get caught in this method, okay? So just keep an eye on that. And then also, since these are all, ///, we can clean this up by doing route group, or actually let's do route prefix. And we're going to prefix it with admin, and then we're going to do a group like that. And let's go ahead and create a group for these. And we'll put all of these in a group. Okay, so now all these are in a group. They're prefixed with admin, so we can actually just get rid of all this admin stuff, which is kind of nice. Now it's just going to be, login. So it just kind of cleans it up. It's all in the admin group. Everything should work. Let's go through and just run a PHP artisan route list just to make sure everything's working correctly, and then we'll go through and test it. Okay, so you can see we've got our name is admin dashboard, admin login, admin submit. They're all in the admin prefix. That's perfect. We currently don't really have the middleware set up except for this one, but we'll go through and do that here in a second. And then everything else looks good. This is all normal. One thing I'll note while we're looking at middleware that might confuse people is in the last video we talked about the web guard. The default guard for authentication is called web. And I want to make sure that you guys don't get web guard confused for the web middleware. Those are two separate things. The web middleware, like what you see here, all the way down, is not the web guard. It's not protecting against the users. What the web middleware is it's like all of the middleware functions that you would need for any browser-based visit to your website. So this is like setting up the sessions, cookies, stuff like that. That's what the web middleware does. And so I want to make sure you understand what the web middleware is doing. It's different than the web guard. And it's kind of confusing that Laravel did that. You can always change the name of web guard to like users, but I just want to make sure that that's clear. Now, there currently is nothing specifically tied to the web guard, but you do see we have a default auth here at the protecting the home page, the /home. And this, because our default authentication guard is web, it will be using that. But you can see it's just set to the default. It's just auth. These two are specified other guards. So this is the API guard, which again is different than the API middleware. So keep that in mind as well. And then this is the admin guard for authentication. All right. Now, if we change the default, then this one would automatically be protected by the default authentication. If you wanted to specifically name it the web middleware, you would want to go through and just do auth web to specify the web guard. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I just want to make, this is confusing because we have an API guard and an API middleware, and they're two completely different things. We also have a web guard and a web middleware, and they're two completely different things. And I just want to make sure you guys don't get those two confused. Okay, so we should be good. Let's go through now and look at our controller. Okay, so everything should be good. Let's go ahead and just set up middleware before I forget in our controller. So this, since we were looking at it just barely, we're gonna set it up in the construct function. Make sure you do double underscore in front of the construct. So this here is two underscores. And then inside of here, we can define the middleware. So we're gonna do middleware, and we're just going to say guest middleware. And we're gonna define specifically the auth guest, all right? So, or not auth, I mean admin. Sorry. So the admin guest. Okay, so we're only doing people that are not logged in as admin is who we're redirecting, or who we want to have access to this. Okay, so perfect. Let's. That's basically everything we need. We can actually just set up our login form now. Forgot a semicolon there. So now let's go ahead through and set up the login function. Real quick, before we get too tight, let's just take a look, make sure this works in our browser. There we go. Everything's good. All right, so now let's go through and set up the login functions. So what we can do here is I like to always write out what we're about to do before we do it. And so for me, we're going to set up those steps. We're going to validate the form data. That's the first step. Oops. Second step is to attempt to log the user in. Okay, if successful, then redirect to their intended location where they intended to go before they got here. And then if unsuccessful, then redirect back to the login with the form data. All right. So that's basically our 4 steps that we need to do, and then we can start using our login. So let's go ahead and validate the form data. This is pretty easy. You guys know this pretty well, hopefully. We're going to just do a this validate. We're going to pass in the request and then create some rules for it. So create whatever rules you need. In our case, we just have the email and then we have password, right? So let's go ahead and just say email is required. We're going to just validate that it's an email. And then the second one is password. And we're going to make password also required. And then if you have other parameters that you want, like a minimum or a maximum, you can set those here as well. All right, so that's basically all we need for that. Then we're going to have it's going to be validated. Obviously, if it doesn't validate, it's going to read, this whole function just redirects back and handles all of that, which is really convenient. Now we can attempt to log the user in. Now this might be where you're thinking it gets really tricky, but it's actually pretty simple. What we're going to do is we're going to be using the auth facade, and actually because we're using the auth facade, let's make sure to import it because otherwise we'll have that rookie mistake there. But we're going to use the auth facade and we're going to use this attempt function or method. So this attempt method is actually the same one that you see in the default authentication. That's what's in the LoginController that we looked at in the source code, right? It used this auth attempt function. And what you do is you just pass in the credentials in an array format. So we're basically passing in the email and the password in an array. And it's going to verify every element that we do and make sure it matches up to somebody in the, in the admin model. Okay, and then there is an optional parameter you can pass in as a second parameter, and this is the remember. And so with remember, you're basically passing in a truthy or falsy value. If it's truthy, it will also set up the session to remember across multiple sessions. If it's falsy, then it will just do it for the one session, basically. So that's basically the function that we're going to be using that handles all of the logic. And that's what makes this super easy. That makes, like I said, that we really don't have to do a lot of the work. We're just doing a basic validate, an attempt, and then some redirects, and that's it. So this whole method here returns true or false if it's true if it's successful, false if it was not successful. It will automatically handle setting up the session, and then it will just return true. And then if it's unsuccessful, then it would just returns false. So what we can do is wrap this in an if statement, and we'll easily know whether it was successful or not. Again, that's the same thing that happens if you go look at the source code. It's the same thing they do. They wrap this attempt function in an if statement. Inside the if statement, they redirect them to the correct place. And outside the if statement, they redirect them to log in again or whatever. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing here. Now, before we actually finish this, I want to mention that remember what I said in the first video, that if we just run normal methods on this auth facade without specifying a guard, it will work. It's just going to default to the default guard. In our case, we need to use the admin guard. So we need to specify a guard for this to work. So let's go ahead and just do that. So we're going to do guard admin, and then we're going to run the attempt on the admin guard. Okay, that way we're running it actually in the admin model instead of the user's model, which would be the default. So that's it. That's what we need. Let's go ahead and set up the if statement. We're going to go ahead and put this guard inside of here. We don't need the semicolon. And that's basically it. Let's go ahead and just configure this credentials. You could set up credentials outside, or we can just do it in line. So we'll just do it in line real quick. Email, and we're going to set email equal to request email. And then we're going to pass in password and set that equal to the password. Now this might actually ring off some alarm bells for some of you guys, because you're thinking, wait, why am I not hashing the password? This is the raw password direct from the form. Well, one of the benefits, or whatever you want to call it, of the attempt function is the attempt function automatically handles hashing the password and checking it against the hash that's stored in the database. So you don't need to manually hash it. You just want to put the raw password in. This is actually something that screwed me up for the longest time. I couldn't figure out why this wasn't working when I was doing this a while ago, and I couldn't figure out why it was never authenticating, and I thought I had screwed this up somehow. And as it turned out, I was just hashing the password myself manually, and then it was hashing it again, so it wasn't matching up with the what was in the database, obviously. So just make sure you remember that. The other thing I'll remember is if you are in Laravel 5.4, then you actually, these automatically will be trimmed. And if anything is left, if there's any empty spaces, they're set to null. So those are two new middlewares that are available. So now by default, if you come look at the middleware, you can see we have trimstrings.php. This will trim every input value coming in from the form. And it'll just get rid of all the white space in the beginning or the end. So that's really nice. You don't need to go through and manually run the trim anymore. You can just pull it straight out of the request object and it will be trimmed automatically, with the exception of password fields and password confirmation. Okay, so if you name any of your fields password or password confirmation, then those ones will not get trimmed. It will retain the white space, and that's good. That's probably a good thing. I just leave it. If you wanted to add a couple other ones that, for whatever reason in your application, you don't want the input to be trimmed, you could just add it to the array here, and it will not get trimmed. Okay, but this by default will get trimmed. This one won't, but then everything should be working. Lastly, let's pass in our truthy or falsy value. What we can do is just pull it in from the request. Just do request remember, and then that will pull in that checkbox. It'll be truthy or falsy, and then it will configure that for us. So that is everything we need. Now we can actually just kind of get rid of this. Let's pull this item up in here. And now if they are successful, we will enter the if loop, the if statement, and then we can redirect them. So let's go ahead and do that. Return, redirect, and where are we going to redirect them? Well, we want to try to redirect them to where they were going before they got pulled out and had to log in. Otherwise, we'll set up a default. And we can do this with a function that you may not be familiar with, and it's called intended. And this is a Laravel method that you can use when redirecting. And this is basically going to, Laravel keeps track of where people are trying to go. And so if the middleware kicks them out and requires them to log in, it actually keeps track of where they were trying to go before they got pulled out of that to log in. And then if we use the intended function, our method, then it's going to put them back where they were trying to go. This could be really handy if someone like clicked a link in an email and they went, they were super deep in the application and then they had to log in. So now when they log in, it's nice to just throw them right back where they meant to go instead of having them start at like the dashboard page or something. Of course, we need to set a default just in case someone is just using the login form and they don't have an intended page that they meant to go to beforehand. We need to set a default. So you can either just manually, code a URL in here, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to hard code it with a route. So we're going to do a named route, So we're going to do admin.dashboard. And that's basically it. That's all we need to do. So now if they successfully log in, we'll send them to the dashboard or their intended location, whichever. Now, last thing we need to do before we can complete this is, if they're unsuccessful, let's redirect them back to the form data. So to do this, we can just do a return, pretty basic. And then we're going to do a return redirect. And then we will pass it back. So this is another function you may be familiar with, may not. This just sent them to the page they were at before, which should be the login page. So it's just going to send them back to that page. And then we're also going to pass the input values in. So we'll pass it in with inputs. Let's pass the request data back. This way it autofills, well, if you've set it up correctly, which it has set it up in our forms or in our view form. Anyway, we'll just pass in the request data, but only pass in we don't want to pass in the password. So let's only pass back the email and the remember. Okay, so then we can set those to be automatically checked when they're done. And that's it. That's our login function. That's basically everything we needed. I know I had to talk a lot during it, but really we just did a validate. We did a attempt. We did the auth guard attempt inside of an if statement, and then we redirected them where they wanted to go, or redirected them back with the input data. And that's it. It's actually really pretty basic. So let's see, we've got our middleware. I think we're good enough to test this now. So let's head back over to Chrome and let's try to log in. You know what? Actually, I don't have an admin. So let's go ahead and create an admin. We'll just use the terminal to do this. PHP artisan tinker. And then let's go through and make a new admin. So we're going to do admin create. And actually, you know what? Instead of that, let's go through. It's a little hard to read it because it ends up being kind of dirty in there. Let's do admin equals new admin. and then we'll just set it up this way. So name equals, we're gonna give it a different name than our user, just so we know which one we're working with. So we'll do admin name, admin email equals hello@devmarketer.io, and then we're gonna do the password. This time we will need to hash the password. So let's do a hash make, and then we're gonna just make the password. Okay, and then last but not least, we can finally save. Actually, we can't save yet. We have a job title field in here that when I set it up, I made it. I didn't change it to nullable. So it's going to be required that we have a job title. So we'll just put job title. We'll put teacher. Okay. Perfect. And then now we can save. Okay, perfect. So now we should have in our database a user. Let's just double check it real quick. Refresh. There we go, dev marketer. We just created this user. So now we should have a user to log in. So now we can do what we just tried, devmarketer.io, and we can do password and log in. Undefined variable request. Oh, this is a rookie mistake. All right, so when we did our login, remember we pulled in the request. We have all this request. Obviously, we need to make sure we have that. Okay, there we go. Let's try this again. Let's just resubmit the form. And now it works. So now we're logged in as our admin. Perfect. Let's try to go to the user page and notice that it makes us log in. So that's a good sign, but we can go back to our admin page and it'll let us into the admin. So we're logged in as an admin, but not as a user. And so we can go to all the admin stuff, but not to the user stuff. Cool, huh? So now let's go through and just log out. So now that we're logged out, let's try to get back in there. Admin, it won't let us in. But what you'll notice is it does redirect us to the user login form. And this is because of we got to tweak some middleware. So the middleware by default is kind of hard coded to redirect us to this login page. So we need to, and we'll do this in the next video, we need to tweak the middleware to basically redirect us to the correct login page for each authentication guard, depending on which one we're trying to access. So that's the one problem we have here at the end of the video. The other thing is that we don't have forget my password set up, but we do have 2 successful guards. Let me just log in as a user real quick. alex@example.com. I think my password is just password. There we go. Now we're logged in as a user. But if I try to log in or go to the admin page, notice that I can't go there. It redirects me back to the user. Now, why is it redirecting us back to the user instead of the login form? Well, once again, it has to do with that middleware. So because the middleware is hard-coded to that /login page, what happens is when I try to go to admin, the admin kicks me out and sends me to the /login page instead of the /admin/login, because we haven't defined that yet. That's the next video. So it sends us to /login. Well, when we get /login has another middleware that only allows guests. Well, I'm logged in as a user, so I'm not a guest. So then it redirects me to the home page. So when it looks like it's just sending us to the user dashboard, that's what's happening. Is it's sending us to the login page, and then the login page is sending us here. And once we define that in the next video, once we tell Laravel which login forms to send us to and stuff like that, then when we try to log in as an admin or try to go to an admin page, it'll actually send us to the admin login instead of back here. But you can see how this works. Now, one thing I will show you guys, the way this is set up right now is let's now go to /admin. So I'm logged in as a user. Note that, okay? So I'm still logged in as a user. I am not logging out. Now let's go to admin/login. I should be allowed to go here, right? Because we've set it with the middleware for auth guest, or for guest admin. That was the middleware that we set. Now, if you just set it as guest, it wouldn't let you do what we're about to do. So I just wanted you can make this decision on what you want. But the way we've got it set up here is we can actually now log in as both an admin and a user at the same time. So now I'm going to log in as a admin. I'm logged in. So now I'm logged in as an admin, dev marketer, and I'm also logged in as a user and Alex Curtis. Do you see what I'm saying? So we actually can be logged in as both. When we do log out, it's going to log us out of both as well. But I just want to note that you can actually maintain multiple sessions, logged in sessions here. Of course, you could configure that, but this is where the way it works. So when we do log out, you'll notice admin no longer works, home no longer works. It logs us out of both of them. Okay. So there you go, guys. Hopefully that made sense. This is the end of the video. In the next video, we're going to go through and just kind of configure that middleware. It won't take too long. It's pretty simple. I'm going to show you 2 places to do this. This was some of the stuff I actually didn't find anywhere really on the internet to get help with this, so I had to figure it out on my own. So if you guys are at all confused about middleware, I highly recommend you take a look at that video. And then finally, the final video in the series after we finish middleware will be setting up our forgot my password function for the admin. So it currently works for users, but I'm just going to show you guys how to make it work with admins as well, or whatever user type you're using. Okay, so make sure you guys, if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already. If you are, thank you so much. I definitely appreciate the support. Also leave a thumbs up if it was informative. I really want these videos to get some traction because there's really nothing out there explaining multiple authentication. So I want to make sure that people can find these videos if you know, they're looking for the same thing. And so by giving that thumbs up, leaving comments, and subscribing, all of that stuff just helps me become more visible, or this video become a little more visible. Okay, if you guys have any questions, reach out to me on Twitter _JACURTIS, and let me know what you guys think of the video. That's it for today. I'll see you guys in the next video.